Hello, this is Hussein Askary from the LaRouche International Movement, reporting from this site of the Stockholm at the site of the Swedish Royal Science Academy, where in a few days certain figures with bad intentions are going to descend on this spot to convene the so-called third Nobel laureate symposium on global sustainability between May 16 and 19. This symposium, which was held twice before in Potsdam, Germany, and at St. James Palace in Britain under the sponsorship of Prince Charles in 2009, will be held this time and be headed by Hans-Joachim Schellnhuber, chairman of the German government's so-called Scientific Advisory Council on Global Change, the WBGU, and will be sponsored by the Swedish king, among others. The purpose of this symposium is to push behind closed doors with no debate or discussion, a global green fascist manifesto propagating a world government forcing nations to stop scientific, technological and economic development under the pretext of reducing the man-made global warming and climate change and managing the so-called limited natural resources of the planet in a sustainable way. Now, there's a reason why this symposium is being held in this closed and isolated location, which resembles somehow the second law of thermodynamics, where things can only decay and degenerate, where there is no place for human creativity that can break through the limits of and barriers of the so-called natural resources. The reason is that when the financially bankrupt British Empire and its cheerleaders like President Barack Obama of the United States and the EU leaders failed at the Copenhagen Climate Summit in December 2009 to publicly push its genocidal plan to ban the innocent carbon dioxide from this planet and doom millions actually to poverty, hunger and death, and reduce the world population to less than 1 billion people. When that failed, they had to change their ways of promoting this plan. It was proven in Copenhagen that the majority of the human race would reject such satanic and unscientific proposals if they were allowed, of course, to debate them openly and have the opponents of this idea having a chance to refute the axiomatic grounds upon which this whole idea and theory of anthropogenic climate change is based on. It was also proven in Copenhagen, as the ClimateGate scandal broke out, that the data upon which the whole theory of man-made climate change was based on was actually sexed up in the British East Anglia University's climate unit, and it was proven to be mere lies. Now you know why the same powers behind the ClimateGate have chosen this location in a closed setting to push their genocidal plans without the knowledge of the rest of the world. But of course we are not going to tolerate this madness to take place on our soil, and have joined hands with Helga Zepp-LaRouche in Germany and Lyndon LaRouche in the United States and with other groups and other nations to expose and eventually get rid of this inhuman and silly idea. Now their plan, according to the symposium organizers themselves, and I'm going to read from their program the little which has been known about it. It says, their program says, quote, "The closed part of the symposium, for participants only, takes place at the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences. It starts with a get-together in the evening of May 16 and concludes with a session open to the media and VIPs, at which the Stockholm Memorandum is signed on the afternoon of May 18. The Stockholm Memorandum, called Planetary Opportunities, Transforming the World in an Era of Global Change, will be signed by Nobel laureates, and during the last session of the symposium, in the afternoon of May 18th, the memorandum will be handed over to one of the most important groups of change makers in the world at this moment, the UN Secretary General's high-level panel on global sustainability." End of quote. Now this is a conspiracy, of course. It's needless to say that the VIPs and Nobel laureates and other guests and journalists who have been carefully chosen for this occasion are ones that agree with the general outline of this symposium. and are not likely to protest the content of the coming memorandum which will be signed, the content of which nobody knows about. Everything is done in invitation only, in typical oligarchical fashion. So suddenly this memorandum or a fascist manifesto becomes scientific and at the same time part of the United Nations agenda. Now it's maybe not an irony that participants of this symposium will be shamelessly mingling under the shadow of this man, Anders Retzius, the father of Swedish eugenics and race biology as it was called at that time. He invented the skull index, a skull measuring tool which he claimed could measure how far a person is human by measuring the skull and other physiological properties of that individual. This Retzius, who is adorning the Swedish Academy of Science, launched, and his son, Gustav Retzius, pioneered the founding of this branch of witchcraft, actually, which was called a science until the demise of Adolf Hitler. Sweden established the first government-sponsored or government-financed eugenics institute through a unanimous vote in the parliament in 1922. It collaborated with the British Eugenics Institute of the Huxleys, and later German Nazi doctors were educated here, or in the institute, which was established in Uppsala, for later deployment for the social, ethnic and racial cleansing of millions of people. Like the climate change hoax being pushed today, this genocidal insanity was called a science, and schools, hospitals, social institutions were advised to follow the recommendations of the so-called racial biologists in planning and implementing their policies. Now, thousands of Swedes, especially women, were forcefully sterilized because they were considered defective. This is maybe the kind of policy which the President Obama's scientific advisor, John Holdren, would like to implement today, as he himself had, if he had a chance, of course, to do that, as he himself had stated in his book, Ecoscience in 1977. This is, however, not a new phenomenon in human history. Population control, control of raw materials, and control of knowledge and science has always been the policy of the oligarchy. And we know that it's as old as the establishment of human societies, as we are informed by the Promethean drama. In modern history, it has been pioneered by the British Empire and its priesthood, such as Thomas Malthus, Adam Smith, and later Bertrand Russell. Unfortunately, it has become gradually a key element of the operations of the United Nations after World War II. And it is being pushed from such locations as Sweden, where no evil intentions are being suspected. Now, I would like to send a message as a Swedish citizen to the nations of the world, and especially to German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Admittedly, we are a small nation in size, but we have been a nation of great inventors, scientists, and entrepreneurs, whose inventions and technologies have saved and improved the lives of human beings for millions of people around the world for more than 100 years. And we are not intending to abandon that tradition or let it be destroyed. We have managed to do that in spite of the oligarchical control imposed on our nation since the murder of King Gustav III in 1792. Our best scientists, poets, and musicians have been inspired by the best of the German classical culture, from Leibniz and Bach to Schiller and so forth. They were later inspired by the great American Revolution, and many of them even moved to America to work and build that nation. Every time we were under the influence of the Venetian or British imperial ideology, our science and culture was destructive. Every time we were under the influence of the humanist republican traditions, we were a gift for all mankind. We invaded Germany in the 30 Years' War, and our king was killed in Germany. But the Peace of Westphalia in 1648 redeemed both our nations, and a new era of peace among sovereign and respect among sovereign nation states was established since then. That very Westphalian idea is right now threatened by this invasion of the Malthusians, such as Schellnhuber, who wants to establish a global governance and abolish our sovereign governments. Germany has become the #1 market for export of Swedish high-value machine tool components. Germany itself is a motor and a generator of wealth all over the world through its innovative industries and entrepreneurs. With the introduction of Schellnhuber's policies through your government, Mrs. Chancellor, your nation will bring destruction upon itself and upon the world. Our protest is not merely against higher energy prices or better climate for our businesses. This is a question of life and death for the whole nation. It's a question of the survival of the human civilization as we have known it so far. So don't let this fascist invasion succeed. A better way of dealing with the problems facing humanity today is to resolve the economic and financial breakdown crisis through the implementation of the Glass-Steagall Act for bank and financial regulation. We must stop the bailout of the bankrupt British financial banking system and its satellites. We should instead focus on building the national, continental, and transcontinental infrastructure projects like Nawaba, the Eurasian Land Bridge, the Transaqua in Africa, and many more to improve the productivity and living conditions of all nations, and also give our youth and future generations a happier future.